James, do you like horror?
You mean like horror cinema or just horror, just pure fear?
I'm going to be more specific. This is a podcast about films, horror cinema.
Yes. So the short answer is kind of no. As a kid, I was way too scared to watch any horror films. And I think it's because I was at school with this boy called James Ibbotson, who, even though he was only like 8 or 9, claimed to have seen every scary film going. And he would describe them to me in extremely explicit and now, as an adult, I realise utterly fallacious detail. So I can still clearly remember him telling me at school one day that he had watched When Worlds Collide the previous night, which was like a film that was far too scary, and that when the planets got close to each other, you could see this guy get his head squished, and he was explaining all these things which do not happen in the film. And I'm sure he had not seen the film, but it left me scarred enough that I stayed well away from horror cinema until I was well into my adult years.
I don't know the boy, but I'm going to call him the dishonest James. There were 2 Jameses. He was dishonest James.
And I was the gullible James, yes.
Oh, no, that gets you a name too, doesn't it? Welcome, everyone, to the Two Real Cinema Club. I am Andres Lorente.
And I am James Rees-Mogg. And every episode we watch 2 movies. We watch a brand new movie just out this week, and we compare it to an appropriate older film, and then we try and compare A with B. And tonight, to quote David Bowie, we are loving the alien.
Ooh,
you see what I did there?
I did. Wasn't expecting it.
Thank you. So sometimes, sometimes we record this podcast and I feel a bit like, we've watched the same film twice. I don't think I've ever felt that as strongly as this week.
Yes.
I've seen a number of shots, more or less identical, frame for frame, pixel for pixel this week. And weirdly, I'm not sure that that's a bad thing.
Ooh.
But more on that later. So this week we have seen Alien Romulus, the new Alien movie, something like 8th in the Alien franchise, I think. And we are comparing it to the Alien movie. That's a word, not a. I didn't stub my toe on something there. Alien from 1979, the Ridley Scott picture.
Yes, indeed. There was a time not long ago where we watched 2 films called The Killer. And they were very different. And then now we watch 2 films called Alien that are very different. Not.
But yes, not exactly. Before we start on Alien, though, I am going to quickly chime in with a point of order.
No.
So the podcast lawyers have advised me to make a very quick announcement.
Oh, no.
That I'm trailing behind the rest of the world with technology. So this week, for the first time, I upgraded my iPhone. I had looked at the new Apple Podcasts app, and I don't know whether you have seen it. It gives you an absolutely fantastic transcript of the podcast.
No.
So it's absolutely incredible. So I was looking at one of our previous podcasts, and it makes us both sound articulate. It writes down what we say in actual complete sentences, and it's properly punctuated and everything. It's pretty amazing. If you read the transcript, we seem an awful lot more intelligent than we do when you listen to our voices.
You go. Sorry, go. Yeah.
But there are sometimes some words that it gets wrong. So it gets my name and your name right. Oh. It spells our names perfectly. Oh. But on the podcast from about 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Joseph Kosinski, the director of Top Gun Maverick, Two Real Cinema Club favorite. And somehow Apple Podcasts believed that we were talking about Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. So our lawyers have advised me to announce that we here at the Two Real Cinema Club do not in any way believe or suggest that Top Gun Maverick, Tom Cruise's international smash hit, was directed by Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber.
Boy.
So don't confuse those two. Could lead to a lot of embarrassment. You've written a play about Ted Kaczynski, haven't you?
Shh. Now he is going to come up in the transcript, and we're going to be bust.
No, it'll put him down as Joseph Kosinski, won't it?
All of that is the good and the bad of artificial intelligence right there, that it makes us sound articulate, but it also associates us with the Unabomber himself. I based a character on someone not unlike Ted Kaczynski. That's what my lawyers tell me to say. Somewhat unlike or somewhat like.
Inspired by.
Yeah. I don't even want to say that much. Woo. All right. I love the legal proceedings. It makes the whole podcast seem so much more professional. We've got the lawyers. I honestly thought that our producers sat there and just wrote down word by word to give us the transcriptions of the podcasts, but
that explains why they've been so busy, transcribing 130 podcasts.
Now we can fire them. Producers, you're fired.
Back to the cinema then.
Yeah.
So this week we're going to see Alien Romulus.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about it?
I can tell you that I saw it in a theater with about 20 people. Big theater. It's the biggest screen we have here in the neighborhood. It's directed by Fede Alvarez. It's an $80 million budget, which buys you a lot of labor in Hungary, apparently.
Ah.
The credits go on forever. I usually stay. You know, I'm one of those guys who usually stays to watch the credits, but this film was, Well, I was anxious to leave the theater after this film ended, but I did see quite a few Hungarian names in there. And that might have been the most interesting part of the film.
So he's not Hungarian, is he? He is Uruguayan, am I right?
I believe he's Uruguayan, yeah. The screenplay is by Rodo Sayages.
Right, okay. I'm so glad you pronounced that rather than me.
With Fede Alvarez, and the characters are, of course, based on the work of Dan O'Bannon, who goes back to the first Alien. So his estate is still collecting money, I suppose, on all these Alien pictures. And maybe they're the ones who just keep saying, hey, we need number 9, number 10, number 11.
I haven't seen any of Fede Alvarez's earlier work. He did an Evil Dead remake, didn't he?
That's correct.
He's done 2 films called Don't Breathe. He did Girl in the Spider's Web, which is kind of like a reboot of those kind of Swedish kind of crime noir pictures. I have not seen any of them. This is the first time I've encountered his work.
I was surprised to find that he's about 45 years old. Because this film feels very immature to me. So I do have this theory that they're taking the old material, basically reprocessing it, and just trying to get the next generation or 2 generations. This might be the film for the grandchildren of the people who liked the first Alien film.
Yeah, it's the TikTok Alien.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. So I'm happy to start talking about it, but we need to play a little music or something.
Why don't you tell me the story?
The film opens in dark space. All of these films open in dark space. There's an image that never really gets cleared up for me, so I'll have you explain it to me at some point soon.
I'll do my best.
All right. There's some sort of destroyed or decommissioned ship in space, and these workers in hazmat suits are extracting a rock. It looks like a fossil or something, and it must contain something super important.
I wrote my usual notes about the opening image.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. Both of these films open in kind of space. And then this kind of, this what looks like an unmanned ship, I think, kind of emerges out of the darkness. I think the opening image is suggesting that evil thrives in darkness.
Oh, boy. But do we ever go back to that ship? I never really felt like that was explained. It's this very elaborate scene. There are a lot of people working on this. It seems very important. And that's it. It just ends.
It's just kind of setting the tone.
Okay.
Telling you this is a dark film.
It is a very dark film.
It is a very dark film.
In both ways. And for that reason, one scene of lightness stands out, and I'll talk about that in a moment. I guess she's a 20-something Rain, lives on this mining colony planet. She wants to escape for a better life. It is very bleak there. She wants to get to another planet where she might see the sun. That sort of tells you how dark it is. You cannot see the sun. She ain't going to see much sunshine in this film, that's for sure. This is another dark film, both in the character of space, but also in the violence. It's dark. She has a brother Did you hear that I put that in quotation marks? She has a
I did. I did hear that. I heard the punctuation very clearly.
Andy. He's some sort of cyborg. What do they call them in the alien world?
It's either robot or android.
Yeah, he's one of something like that.
I was going to ask you, is he named after Amos and Andy?
I hope not. I don't think so.
Okay, right. Okay. Right.
I didn't get a idea on his name, the meaning for his name.
Okay.
But he can communicate with Mother, who's the evidently unhackable mainframe computer for the entire galaxy. She's been running very well for 45 years or something like that. A few updates here and there, but this is Mother. She's still on the journey in this trip. And Andy can gain access to the security codes across all these ships and practically the entire corporate fleet. As he was dying, Rain's father, as far as I could tell, reprogrammed Andy to protect Rain and keep her happy at all costs. That's sort of his mission statement. And for a film like this, good luck, Andy, because you're heading into the world of xenomorphs. I had to look that one up. Which by this point must be like a well-known quantity in the galactic mining industry, because they've been kicking around for 45 years now. Is my calculation correct there? 45, right?
I think it's supposed to happen. I read that it's supposed to happen 40 years after the events of the first Alien film. But I think the xenomorphs are still a mystery at this point.
Okay.
Because the first Alien sequel, Aliens, happens another 40 years after the events of this movie, and nobody knows what the aliens are in that either. Okay. So I reckon this is the galaxy's best kept secret and remains so for 100 years. You've
done your research. Your xenomorph research. There's some other names for them too, but I think I've penciled.
We had a lecture in med school.
So this mining colony, considering its population is around 2,000, the colony has an active economy of exotic dance, street crime, prostitution, and all of the sin-related industries. In the brief time that we see the planet, we see seemingly all of its inhabitants. Rain's friends, this sort of group of early 20s somethings, Tyler, Bjorn, Kay, and Navarro have access to a spacecraft, and they invite Rain and Andy on a trip to raid a decommissioned spaceship for some cryogenic fluids that they can make, so that they can make a trip to this better planet. But being an indentured servant not only to the mining colony, but also to the overlords of the hero's journey, Rain must refuse the call.
She refuses the call. Oh, yep, there it is. I spotted that.
It's a massive one. It's just, it has to happen. So
it does have to happen. And it does.
So then, well, I think everyone already has a pretty good idea of what happens. Well, I'll just speak slowly. We'll call that the spoiler bell. I'll speak slowly.
Should we ring a slowed down spoiler bell?
Bring it on. Mother, make spoiler bell.
It was good. She listens to you.
Mother still works. She's good. They launched from the planet's surface and into space in one of the film's really great scenes, I think. I use that loosely. I don't say there are many great scenes, but in a good scene. And then somehow there are cigarettes in space again. I don't know how. This is something I didn't understand in either film, but you can have a smoke once you're up there somehow. While there are far too few of them, the images outside the ships and the stations are by far the best scenes in the film. I loved this stuff, like seeing planets and asteroid belts and stars on the big screen. It's incredible. So this is like 1 minute of the 2 hours of the film, and it's a good moment. It felt real. It felt like they're trying to get outside of the gravity of the planet. And into space. It looked very impressive. And just seeing space, there were only a few of these moments, but I loved them. But this is basically a film of dark interiors. The darkness of the human mind. And one of the most sort of overplayed inventions in cinema, the xenomorphs, or the Internecivus raptus, this now proliferating creature that, despite its massive numbers, there are a lot of them in this film, it can still be defeated as it was back in 1979. Or can it be defeated?
Or can it?
And I will say it takes about 40 minutes to get to that point, so it's a good chunk of the film. I think everyone knows what happens after that. Basically, there's a lot of entanglements with these creatures, and one by one, people get killed off, and then someone escapes. Or maybe a couple of people escape. Or do they?
I wrote in my notes that this film I wrote here is like making a new game from an old deck of cards.
Ooh, yeah.
So there's been a bunch of Alien movies now, so many that we, the cinema-going audience, are kind of aware of all the little details. So we know, even though the characters do not, we know what the aliens are capable of. Yeah. We know about their life cycle. We know that they have acid for blood. We know that they've got a long tongue with a mouth on the end of it. We know all those kind of details. And I think a lot of the fun of the film is watching people who don't know those details discover what we already know. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit like that famous Hitchcock observation that if you have two people talking at a table in a cafe and then the cafe blows up, you have a big surprise. Whereas if you have two people talking in a cafe while you have previously been shown that there is a bomb hidden under the table, then you have a bit of genuine drama and tension. And I think that's part of the way that this film works, or the way that it's intended to work, is that we, the audience, are not discovering any of this stuff. We are enjoying watching it play out in a slightly different scenario. We know what the cards say, but we're enjoying watching them be played out in a hand that we haven't seen before.
That's nice. And I think of the whole film as being kind of a bomb itself, so that it's constantly exploding.
But we love explosions.
Yeah, they sell. They sell for sure. Yeah.
I tell you what, yeah, I do think this film has a pretty good idea of what it's about. But insofar as I've written down here, again in my notes, I would say this film is about rape. It's about kind of rape in its kind of many forms, insofar as there is a kind of corporate rape of the bodies of these young people working on the mining planet, who are basically contracted to work until they die. They are indentured slaves. But on top of that, there is a extreme amount of very Freudian, clearly metaphorical sexual imagery in this film.
Yeah.
This is a film which is all about a penis monster which invades the bodies of its victims. And they take full advantage of that, don't they? For the first time, you see the alien emerge from somebody's chest, which we all aware is going to happen. The first time that happens, the alien actually has a foreskin, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You shoot these aliens, and something that looks like semen comes out of them, doesn't it?
Yes,
they are kind of wriggling in and out of people's bodies. It's all a pretty clear metaphor. And in the same way that there's at one point later in the movie there is an alien cocoon, which Bjorn, the Mancunian young lad, he electrocutes, and this looks very, very vaginal.
Yes.
To me. And then and then spoiler. In the third act, which I think is where the film kind of loses control of its material, but in the final act, the third act, this kind of new hybrid alien emerges from the womb of one of the other characters, and it's not only is it sort of 9 or 10 feet tall, but I think it seems to have an anus where it might have a penis. I mean, basically what I'm trying to say is the whole thing looks like Freud would have a field day.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think it's not subtle, but at the same time, I think that it probably operates on a level where the average viewer doesn't quite get all that. So that makes it a little bit subtle. Yep. There's a lot there, and I think the big scene, which is the one moment when the theater that I was in started sort of laughing and commenting, was the birth scene, which is really quite disturbing, and we can talk about that or we can not talk about that. I'm fine either way, to be honest with you.
I think now that you've brought it up, how can we not talk about it?
Do we need to say any more to get there? I don't know that we do. We can probably go right there. I will say a couple things. I felt like there was this heavy-handed ticking clock motif, which is pretty common in films. But I guess it's Mother who's telling us that we're going to crash into the ice belt around the planet. And then
originally they believe they have 36 hours
exactly.
before the ship's going to crash, and then because of a big accident, suddenly they only have, I can't remember, is it 25 minutes or something like that?
Yeah.
Something runs into it's kind of, again, it's going through those standard steps, isn't it? You have a ticking clock, and then you raise the stakes. It's going through all those normal steps.
And again,
I think it does them effectively.
It does set up what I think is one of the best scenes, is where the ship is sort of rolling out of control and you're heading into this ice belt. I mean, the planet nearby looks like Saturn, so it's got this belt around it of asteroids and rocks and snow and ice or whatever. And it's beautiful. I loved those scenes. They were just... It was space. I want to see space in these films. I don't want to be stuck in an interior. And I guess, with a horror film, you have to be in enclosed spaces, so that the pressure's on and all that. But I'd like to see a little bit of variety in my filmmaking. And I found this just to be dark, dark, dark. And it gets super dark. So we should mention that Kay, one of the characters, she's played by Isabella Merced. She's pregnant. We don't know who the father is right away, but she announces to Rain that she's pregnant. Did you get the idea that it was one of the characters in the crew who was the father?
I tried to figure that out. I wonder whether it might have been Bjorn.
Yeah, that's what
but because she does kind of say, it's kind of, she's asked who is the father, and she says, it's some a-hole. Yeah. and he fits that description. But maybe he's not the only one on the prison planet. Yeah. So maybe they hinted it. I'm not completely sure.
Okay.
I mean, he seems quite protective of her towards the end of the film, doesn't he?
He does.
But maybe that's just a normal human reflex.
I felt like he was the father without them announcing that. And of course, because she's pregnant, she vomits buckets and buckets. Now, you as a doctor and a father would probably know more than I do, but it seems like a little bit too much vomit for the average bit of morning sickness. But then again, maybe she's not carrying the average child either. So I guess we should probably talk about it a little bit. It seems that they've taken her back to what? She's been taken by Rain and Andy sort of back to this safe place on the original shuttle. I couldn't tell exactly where we were. And they're going to get her set up for the cryogenics, right? She's going to go into space with them. So they're sort of freezing her, but then I guess at some point earlier, she has been infected by the alien. And the alien earlier, when Navarro dies, it comes out of her chest, the classic way that we see the alien.
Right.
But in this case, it goes through her reproductive organs and comes out from her birth-making place.
I like that. It's very medical. I like the rigorous scientific naming there. Yes, the birth-making place.
And it is bloody. Is
that Latin? Is that
birth-making?
Carry on, yes.
It's safe. It's just safe language.
Desperately trying to keep the podcast PG.
So it does come out looking very phallic, of course. It's bloody, it's violent, and it leaves her body. So that you do have what we think is this hybrid. Now, I don't know the science behind it. Maybe you want to explain that, the medical, because it seems like it would be a normal baby, but my impression was almost that the creature had eaten the baby, but we see parts of a baby though too. That's the funny thing, right?
We do see parts. I think this strange kind of it's like an invasion of the body snatchers type seed pod that comes out of her, and then it opens up, and it looks like there's a little baby inside, and it looks quite sweet. But these babies grow quick.
Yes. So
my goodness, these babies grow quick.
I'm not easily disturbed, but I found this to be a pretty disturbing moment in the film, and it remains to one's opinion as to whether the film deserves this big moment or if it was really set up very well. But then the thing does grow quickly into this half human, as you said, half alien creature, very tall, very quickly, and goes back to the mother at one point and seems to be either suckling on her or eating her, right?
Yes. To a British audience,
Yeah.
that disturbingly tall, disturbingly thin,
Yeah.
chinless, pale alien, to a British audience, looks like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who's a prominent figure in the Tory party.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether that's what they were intending or not. It seems a little bit too keenly satirical for this film.
Yeah, very, very tall, very white, colorless, really. And in stark contrast to the set design, everything's dark. The creatures are generally quite dark, but it is a very disturbing scene. And this sort of gives, I think one thing about this film is it really feels like an intellectual property just being milked for another generation and a whole lot more profit. But then you've got this one angle, like, will that hybrid sort of survive or reproduce in some way or become the next alien?
But I think this is like a theme that they play on with pretty much every alien film. I think all of them managed to introduce some new kind of hybrid or some new bit of the life cycle. I mean, this is. I'm going to skip to the end here insofar as I'm going to tell you. I think I enjoyed this film a lot more than you did.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I came out of this film actually thinking this was pretty good.
Oh.
I enjoyed it. I'll explain to you probably later on why I have this quite positive impression about it. But this film studiously contains nods to every previous film, and in the previous. There's a big library of things that it has to nod at. So you get a little bit from every film. So I think this new Alien, it's a bit of a nod to the end of Alien Resurrection, which saw a kind of a Ripley Alien hybrid. It's a little bit of a nod in its design to the engineers that were in Prometheus. But we have things like a plasma rifle, which I think comes from the game Aliens versus Colonial Marines, which I haven't played, but I think that's where it comes from. There were a whole bunch of save points in the movie, which are taken directly out of the video game Alien Isolation. We have that very famous line from the movie Aliens, "Stay away from her, you bitch," which is regurgitated word for word. We have like the dilating doors and the vents from the original Alien movie. There's a little bit of all of these films, every film, every game, gets a little tip of the hat. And after a while, this degree of fan service, this sheer weight of reference to earlier works, threatens to drag the whole film down with it, I think. But that said, you know what? I think this film has characters that are, and we'll talk about the other film later, but I think the characters in this film are actually better rounded and more sophisticated than they were in the first Alien film. And I think this film has got a bit of a better idea of what it's about than the first Alien film. I think it explores some of its themes more in a deeper manner than the first Alien film. And it does a few things which I have never seen before, which are a really exciting new spin on some of the material that we've had in the past. I think out of the characters that we do spend any time with, the most interesting of them, who do you think I'm going to say is the most interesting character?
Andy.
Andy is definitely the most interesting character in this film. And when it goes through the biggest change, I wrote in my notes, he is speed running Flowers for Algernon. Have you read that book?
Oh, years ago, yeah.
Which is a book about a sort of a man with kind of very low educational attainment, who then becomes a subject in an experiment where he becomes very intelligent, and he kind of takes this treatment which makes him gradually more and more intelligent until he becomes the most intelligent person who ever lived. But it's only for a few months, and then his intelligence gradually wanes and drains away, and he goes back to being a person of very low educational attainment again. But as it drains away from him, he has this terrible remorse of seeing everything that he's gained disappear. It's a beautiful book, actually. It's a really lovely book. And Andy's doing exactly the same thing, and he's doing it over the course of about 60 minutes.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I suppose he is Joe 90. Do you remember? Did you ever watch that?
Joe 90? No.
So it's like a super marionation animated television series from the late 60s or the early 70s.
Oh.
So it was from the same stable as Thunderbirds. I don't know whether even that appeared in the US. These were kind of British series for children, or I suppose for a family audience, all done using puppets. But in this case, Joe 90 was this spy who had a pair of glasses with a little chip in it. And every week they would change the chip, and the chip would give him like the knowledge of a particular expert. So he would become an expert marksman, or he would become an expert archer, or an expert sailor, or something like that, because he put the glasses on and then he would have all that knowledge. And it's a cute idea. I think it's something which probably deserves a remake in the 21st century. But again, Andy is he has a bit of that Joe 90 sort of storyline. I thought the most interesting thing about him, I think he's tremendously well played. I think it's David Johnson. He's a British actor, plays him. I found him very watchable. He was the character I wanted to spend the most time with. And I tell you what, this film has some clever and interesting things to say about the way that some people's worst fear is an educated and confident person of colour. He gets an upgrade from being a bit of a bumbler to being an extremely knowledgeable scientist type, and that makes everybody around him suddenly see him in a way which reflects the personalities of the other characters in a really an interesting way. I think it's a clever bit of storytelling. I think well written character. If I'd written that, I would be pretty proud. I think.
I think for me, it's that that's a part that really demands a lot of range, because he's really, every time his chip gets changed, he has to change personality. So it's a gift to an actor, because you get to play a handful of parts.
Yes.
But it really is the standout performance of the whole film. It's the centerpiece. I don't think it really holds it together. It makes it that much better, but definitely kudos to him. It's a good performance, and that's the best written character for sure.
There's another little element which I've never really quite seen in a film before, which I think is cleverly set up and cleverly taken advantage of, which is the notion of the gravity purge. Early on in the film, the space station has no gravity, but they explain that all the gravity kicks in momentarily for a few seconds, every 15 minutes, something like that. And it's that little seed which they plant. Full well that's going to come back at some important pivotal plot moment. And I reckon it's an idea that it will probably recycle in future films, because I thought actually it's not something I've ever really quite seen before. I thought, in a science fiction action horror picture, that was pretty cute. I thought it was pretty clever. I enjoyed that. I think there's a bunch of good ideas, and I think of the many things that it takes from the previous films, I think it's taken some of the right things from the previous films. It has this kind of shooting style which is very much informed by the original Alien. It's lots of steady cam, isn't it? Lots of moving camera. You have these shots where the main characters are kind of behind objects, or they're kind of a bit out of focus, or you can tend to focus on things that are in the foreground which are not very important to the story. Everything is shot largely in darkness. There are plenty of frames where almost the entire frame is dark. And I think for a film which is sort of about this darkness, about the way that evil persists in darkness, I think these are probably the right artistic decisions to make. I came away feeling, the thing was actually broadly pretty successful in what it intended to achieve, and the skill that was used to achieve it. Is it Citizen Kane? No, it's not. But what is? This is an Alien film. I'm guessing you buy your ticket at the Odeon, wanting to get your money's worth, wanting to receive the thing that it says on the outside of the packet, and you do. I think it delivers the thing that you asked for. I think it delivers things that the audience are paying for. The only thing I did write that the only other thing I will mention in my notes is that maybe there are too many callbacks, and I wrote down the callbacks are a bit over-egged, and then I realised that over-egged is one adjective that an Alien film really should be trying hard to avoid. But yes, a bit over-egged, but you know what? Broadly, I thought it was successful.
You mean callbacks from other films and the other intellectual property?
I mean, I think they must be contractually obliged to provide the callbacks. You kind of have to do the callbacks. I think the way they did them was actually, pretty fun. They did the callbacks as well as anyone might expect. Sometimes they overdo it, but That's not too bad. But I tell you what, for all the praise I've just given on it, I am still going to pick up the space phone and make a sub-ether wave interplanetary call to the Cliche Squad.
Cliche Squad.
Space phone. Because that also 10 cents.
Actually, it'll be 10 credits or something, won't it?
It's got to be more than that, yeah. 10.
You'll find this question very hard to answer. Did you spot any cliches in this film?
It's full of cliches. That's part of the intellectual property, I think. Yep. There are definitely a couple. I have 4, I think. Dragging your leg like Frankenstein means you're hurt, mortally hurt.
Yes, that is a real.
There's the Frankenstein leg drag there. Wind in hair in dramatic moments. Now, I understand this is a drafty spaceship with poor roofing because both in the original film and the current films, there's always rain and there's water in there. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Standing water and falling water, believe it or not. So these ships must have their own microclimates, but there's enough wind produced to make Rain's moment when she's sort of separating from Andy very dramatic. So that one, I think one of the most egregious ones is man training a woman to use a gun in a flirtatious moment. It's reaching on the back and helping her hold the gun and position it properly and she's just holding the gun. It's overplayed. And then the classic sliding under doors just at the last second. They're about to shut. It's one of these vertical dropping doors, but the hero always gets in just at the last moment. And for me, like, simple statistics suggest that at least half the time someone wouldn't make it. And I'd love to see someone not make it and then use their wits to get out of the situation. That's more interesting to me. Or to die horribly dying horribly while their friends watch from the other side of the door, or get split in half by the door. All of those, to me, at this point, are far more interesting than the hero getting in under the bell. So,
I think being split in half by the door, that was done in Starship Troopers, wasn't it?
Oh, really?
I think?
Oh, God, I hope so.
Always trust Paul Verhoeven to take the goriest way out.
Yes.
Some of the cliches I counted. I mean, I have written here. There are so many callbacks. This film is like a greatest hits album.
Yeah.
But it's maybe the cliches are actually kind of genre staples rather than cliches. So like the evil faceless corporation. Yeah. So we've seen that in every dystopian film ever. The simple plan that can't go wrong. That the moment that a woman vomits, she's obviously pregnant.
Thank you.
Because women never vomit for any other reason, do they? There's all the kind of the usual hero's journey milestones that we've talked about. She refuses the call. We have allies and enemies. We have an all is lost moment. We have the innermost cave. And I think the hero's journey is so overused now. Films can't really get greenlit without using it, which I think is a significant problem for commercial cinema as a whole. But we kind of talked about that before. And yes, I mean, the fan service nostalgia nods are a bit overwhelming. They are a bit over-egged. But the other thing I read at the bottom of my Cliche Squad notes is that this is, I think, is one of the purest genre films that we have seen for a while. It's not trying really to be anything. It's almost like an Alien movie is a genre in itself, and it's being a genre film in the genre of Alien with a capital A. So I as I said before, I am happier to forgive cliches in this case because the film isn't pretending to be anything but an Alien genre piece. I wrote underneath here, and this is an extended metaphor. You know how I love these. I said, I don't get angry at every rock band that doesn't include a bagpipe player and a trapeze artist and a woman playing kalimba. Because rock bands are guitars and drums, and that's what they are. If every band was a 4-piece rock band, then we would need to have a talk. But if I see a particular rock band being a rock band, then I'm happy. Well, they're a rock band. They're all kind of trying to be Led Zeppelin because that's what the brief is. This is an alien sci-fi horror film. And that genre, it's not entirely as restrictive as saying be Led Zeppelin, but it's doing something similar. And I think in this case, this film is being Led Zeppelin and playing the riffs as well as you might hope. I clearly am getting soft because I have a lot more forgiveness in my heart this week than you do.
Far more.
So you can be bad cop and I will be good cop.
Yeah, I think there's another analogy there. At least, 1/4 of Led Zeppelin is dead now. And they have engaged John Bonham's son to play occasionally, I guess. But I think in 45 years, I want to see some sort of progress. And I think if you see your favorite bands, and I have seen a couple of them recently, who've been around for a long time, they tend not to be very strong or very original towards those later years. And I think this is kind of where this is. For me, this is a really tired intellectual property. And the fact that it is actually recycling so much from other films and video games shows me that it's kind of tired. So you're just locked in. I just don't see any originality. And I think you're right. It does do exactly what it's supposed to do, but I think that bar is super, super low. I don't think many people take any meaning out of these films at all. So it's really basically just trying to rework that material, get some more tickets sold, and make some more money. So I'm not a fan of the genre. I'm definitely not a fan of 9 films in a series. I just think there's $80 million there. We could make 10 good small films, So I just find it a little insulting intellectually. It's really hard to sit down and watch these films for me. I think you've done a wonderful job of talking about its virtues and finding some little jewels in there. But as I said, for me, the most interesting stuff was just images of space. I want to see a really interesting story in space. I don't want to be on that one ship the whole time. In dark, dark spaces, there's this one room where they finally, I don't know, they have better light bulbs. You'd think by this time in human history it would have better light bulbs. There's this one room where there's light, and it just touched me. It's like, oh my God, I can see things. There's something happening. There's light on the actors' faces. It was a big reveal. And, I think it was strong for that reason because it was the only scene in the film like that. So it had this real impression on me. But I'd love more moments like that. I will speak a bit more high-mindedly, I hope. I think that the problem with this film for me is more than anything else, I think you've taken this really powerful antagonist or this potentially powerful antagonist. And I think in part because it's so historical at this point, it's overplayed, but also because there are a bunch of them in this film. It's not like we're going up against one of the aliens. So the power has been diffused. And then they've got this, I would call it an excuse in the gravity, what is it, gravity delay sort of thing. That's the one moment you can really shoot a gun at them because they're not floating around or whatnot. It just felt like this exposition that gives us an excuse to use the weapons we want to see. But, Jaws is great because there's one shark. It's not even a good-looking shark by these days standards, right? But it's scary because it's one enemy and you still don't see it very often. So for this, you have the young aliens are like these octopus hands with a tail that can get right on the face and then get into the body somehow. Those guys are running all around the place. There are a lot of the xenomorphs just breeding and whatnot. And for me, it makes it a weaker antagonist. I think what this film actually needed was kind of that one antagonist that you've got to hunt down before it hunts you down. And instead, they're just popping out everywhere. So it actually, ironically, I think it disables the antagonist. So I'd like to see less of that. I know this is a crazy writer thing though, but why are they so mad? What's the motivation of the xenomorphs? Are they just hungry and they just want to eat? Because these things have multiple mouths, multiple sets of teeth, all sorts of ways of getting into you and killing you. But is it like Ripley just pissed them off so much forever that now they want to just kill anything human? So, what are they after?
Presumably, are they so angry that someone turned the lights out? Is that the thing that made them really cross? I can't see anything. Just turn the lights on.
Turn the lights on. Turn the lights on. There's this one moment where if they stop moving, right? If they have heat signatures. The humans have heat signatures, and the aliens catch up on the heat. And I don't know if this is a rule from previous films or whatnot. It is kind of funny that Andy has to explain heat signature to this guy who's just flown a ship into space without any difficulty whatsoever. Heat signature? What's that? Your body. So, there are all these little outs of, you can either reduce the gravity or just stop moving or maybe just go to a different spaceship or something like that. But I just didn't feel like they weren't menacing to me, and in part because I know it's a horror film and I know what's going to happen.
Right.
But they're less menacing, ironically, because there are a bunch of them in various stages of their life cycle. And it just weakens the antagonist, which really needs to be strong.
The purity of having one big bad. Yep. That's something that we will discuss when we come to talk about the original Alien in a minute. Well, why don't we have a break now?
Okay.
We will desperately look for the light switch, and then come back and we will talk about the 1979 granddaddy of this movie, Ridley Scott's Alien. This week's sponsor of the Two Real Cinema Club is the new Brundle Pixley AI phone. The new phone with added AI. So they sent us this to read out. Do you remember when smartphones weren't so smart? When you had to type using your own words? When your pictures looked like grainy, poorly lit versions of the real world? Well, back when you had to take 20 selfies to get that one that looked good. Join the great leap forward with the new Brundle Pixley AI phone. Added AI lets you edit photos right on your phone. Make yourself look better, clean up the messy background, all with AI. Add people that you weren't with, doing things that they weren't doing, in places that none of you ever visited. Wish you had a flash car and a big house, want to have gone to the Caribbean but can't afford it? The Brundle Pixley AI phone will create AI lifestyle snaps that will be the envy of your friends. Do you need an alibi, proving that you were on the other side of the world at the same time that a serious crime was taking place? The Brundle Pixley AI phone has got your back. Do you want to take a photograph of a world leader taking part in an atrocity? We're on it. If you'd like to destabilize society, foster mistrust, and quicken the disintegration of civilization, hurrying us back to a dark age of paranoia, violence, political extremism, persecution of people that you don't like, and victimization of the helpless, the Brundle Pixley AI phone will do all that and more. The Brundle Pixley AI phone. When we discovered that we could, we didn't pause to think if we should. So get the AI phone for the low, low cost of $599 plus everything you hold dear.
I need a new phone, so Vera from the sponsors give us products to try out, so I'm happy to have a Brundle Pixley AI phone. I need it. Like the remains of Ian Holm, we are back.
Ian Holm's back is about the only thing that's still left of his body in this film. We are back.
The man features in both films, though. 45 years apart.
There's a lot of estates being enjoying a good payout this month, aren't there? We are back to talk about Alien from 1979, directed by Ridley Scott. Written by Dan O'Bannon. Ronald Shusett, who met at the UCLA screenwriting program. This week, I'm happy to say I've read the book, but not the book of Alien. So I did buy the book of the film back when. Do you remember when novelizations used to be like a thing?
Yes.
Yeah, do they still exist? Is there still a novelization you can buy of movies these days?
No, I think it's more of a graphic novel, or probably a video game would be the equivalent, right?
Yeah. I bought the Alan Dean Foster novelization of the film Alien when I was probably, I think, like 10 or 11 years old.
Wow.
Too young to see the film. But I read the novelization, and I remember reading it on holiday and enjoying it so much. It's one of the very few books I've read in my life where I got to the final page and I immediately turned back to the first page and started reading it again.
Yeah. Wow.
Was it a good book? Probably it wasn't. Was I 10 years old? Yes, I was. That is not the book that I read this week. This week I read The New Screenwriter Looks at the New Screenwriter, which is one of the books that we were recommended to read when we were at film school. This is written by William Frug, who he ran the UCLA screenwriting program in the 1970s and 1980s. So if you have any complaints about the quality of Hollywood screenwriting during the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, basically it's all of his fault because he trained all of those guys.
Yeah.
And they are largely guys. So this book it's a bunch of interviews with screenwriters. And I think the first or second interview in the book is with Dan O'Bannon. And so it's fascinating to read about his thoughts about the film. This was like his kind of big hit. He had worked on Dark Star with John Carpenter, and then wanted to kind of write something that would sell. So apparently he wrote the first 30 pages of this book, and then of the movie. I mean, he wrote the first 30 pages of Alien. Didn't really know where to take it, and then he got asked to work on Alejandro Jodorowsky's adaptation of Dune.
That's right.
So he worked on that, and there he met like a whole bunch of production design people, artists who then inspired him to go back and finish the Alien script, featuring this kind of weird penis-shaped alien. So that's kind of how it came about. It's interesting to read the interview with him because at the time that he was interviewed, he was kind of really riding high. He'd had a hit with Alien. He'd had a hit with a helicopter movie called Blue Thunder. Have you ever seen that?
Oh boy, I know the title. I don't think so. No.
It's Roy Schneider, I think, and Malcolm McDowell as a baddie, and it's sort of fairly cheesy, but it became a TV series, and I think it made Dan O'Bannon quite a bit of money. And at the time, but right at the beginning of the interview, William Frug asks Dan O'Bannon. He says, what's the secret to a successful script?" And O'Bannon tells him 3 acts and a conflict.
Wow.
And that's still what people say now, isn't it? That's,
yeah,
it's still the same advice. This is why we get these 3-act hero's journey scripts. But interestingly, after they sold the script, the shooting script for Alien was largely rewritten by Walter Hill and David. I think it's Giller or Gillet.
Okay.
But basically, it's a Walter Hill script. So the Writers Guild of America, I think, gave Dan O'Bannon the sole credit for the screenplay, but actually the screenplay to the film is all the words that you hear are written by Walter Hill. Oh. And interestingly, those 2 guys, the producers, are the ones who added the Ian Holm character, Ash. So I might have something to say about how kind of the movie feels a lot like a Walter Hill project, I think, once we start talking about it.
No, I mean, it seems like Dan O'Bannon's estate still gets tons of money, but maybe Walter Hill's estate should be skimming some profits too off all these.
I think spin-offs. Walter Hill's name may still appear at the beginning of Alien Romulus, actually.
Oh, okay.
I think possibly he still does get a name check, I think, as being producer of the original film. But I don't know that for sure. I might have to go back and check. Did you see this film when it was first out?
Pretty much. I mean, this is so long ago at this point that I can't remember. But yeah, I remember my cousin coming to visit us from Boston. Boston's where everything came first, and then he talked about it. He saw Battlestar Galactica when we were still watching Star Trek, and then he talked about Alien. And it wasn't long after that. I probably, it might have been 80 or 81, 82 at the latest that I saw it, but pretty close to its original release for sure.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I didn't see it until I was kind of well into my 20s, I think. And I was, far too scared. I'm pretty sure this would be one of the films that my friend James Ibbotson told me all about, even though I'm sure that he didn't see it either.
Dishonest James.
So, shall I? This film is 45 years old, but shall I tell you the story anyway?
Tell me a little bit anyway, yeah, please.
So the year is 2122. So less than 100 years from today.
Wow.
But 143 years ahead of 1979, when the film was released. So the blue-collar crew of the space trucking tow ship Nostromo are woken from hypersleep, believing that they've arrived back at Earth, only to discover that the ship's computer has intercepted an alien message from a planet far off their course, and in keeping with their contractual obligations, the crew must investigate or forfeit their pay for this trucking mission. So they land on a windy and inhospitable world, that looks to my eyes like an average November morning in the UK. I think I've been to school in worse weather than that. But anyway, they land on this planet and they discover a crashed, derelict alien ship and a hold full of weird eggs.
Oh, eggs.
Eggs. Oh, man. There's a famous egg on the poster. I was reading about this. Apparently the poster's egg is just a hen's egg, which has been kind of dressed and treated. Whereas the eggs that appear in the film look nothing like that egg.
Yeah.
Considering that the egg is like the symbol for the whole movie, they get it completely wrong on the poster.
Yeah.
And I never really noticed that.
As a result, I think I remember that scene incorrectly as well. Because when John Hurt gets faced down there, it's almost more like this aggressive black flower that gets at him, right?
Yeah.
So it opens up. And I remember it as being this beautiful, well-lit, like, field of eggs. So I just completely... Well, this is the director's cut, I think, that I watched. I might have watched a different version, but I remembered it being very different. It might be a different alien film or a different film altogether, but I remembered the eggs as being more attractive so that you would get close to them, you know?
Oh.
If I were down on a planet, I'm not going to get close to those things. They were scary.
These eggs.
Yeah, exactly.
Joking.
No way. That was just bad thinking.
So when one of the eggs bursts and a lobster-like creature leaps out to wrap itself around Kane, John Hurt, he's brought back on board by Captain Dallas, Tom Skerritt, despite Sigourney Weaver, Ripley's objections. The alien apparently dies, but not before seeding a larva inside the unfortunate John Hurt. When it bursts out of him in one of the most famous horror sequences in cinema, which incidentally is exactly the midpoint. I checked my watch. It's pretty much exactly the center of the film. A cat and mouse chase around the dark and labyrinthine ship begins that will see most of the crew die and a new cinematic icon be born.
Oh my God, that's beautiful. I love cat and mouse. Little nod.
Oh, that's
to
good.
Jonesy
Yeah, you're right.
there.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh, cinematic icon born. Oh, who writes this stuff? Did you get the AI guys to write this? Or?
As if I would admit to that.
Does the Brontel Pixley AI phone do this work? Or?
Yeah, that's true. I'm going to get that phone to write all of my synopses from now on.
Brilliant.
So you know what? I have not seen this film for at least 20 years. I bought the DVD back when DVDs were a thing. And I remembered back when I very first bought a computer which had a DVD drive in it, a little laptop. This is one of the DVDs that I would take with me on call in the hope that I would have a quiet night and I'd be able to sit and watch a film.
Wow.
So I remember watching it kind of in a darkened on-call room in a kind of spooky echoing hotel, hospital. What am I talking about? Hospital, being on call. But I haven't seen it for about 100 years. So it's interesting to go back to it. And like you, the film is a little bit different to what I remember.
Yeah.
We watched like the super high quality 4K version, which is on Disney Plus at the moment. And I'm not sure that the new 4K transfer actually does the film many services.
Yeah.
Insofar as, when I watched it on a slightly grainy DVD on a laptop, everything looked fantastic, whereas the 4K version makes the models and some of the special effects actually look a bit ropey.
Yeah.
It kind of betrays a little bit more, shows a little bit more of the wires and the hand in the puppet. I still think the lighting is fantastic in this film. The music, I think, is fantastic. Great camera work, and just this novel idea of sci-fi, visceral body horror.
Yeah,
all are just as good as they ever were.
Yeah, great concept. I agree with you on the music. Jerry Goldsmith.
Yes.
A little funny thing is I very often recycle my notes in my paper. So I had written Jerry Goldsmith because he basically wrote every space film of the 60s and 70s. He scored them all, including Star Trek, right? So I flip over my paper, and it's the notes from Capricorn 1, and it says music Jerry Goldsmith, which, of course, is at least a month ago. So it's the same piece of paper, and it just reinforced the idea that Jerry Goldsmith knew what he was doing. It is great music that really suits the film, suits the look of it. It's probably It's actually not as dark as Romulus, I don't think. I mean, there's more light in these scenes. There's some lighter moments, I think. There's a little bit of humor here and there. So I enjoyed this film much, much more. It's still not in my wheelhouse. I'm not really into the body horror, but this film does body horror very well at a time when it hadn't been done that well before, I don't think. So I just really enjoyed it. And it's filmmaking. I mean, this is some beautiful widescreen imagery. I mean, just these beautiful, big, sort of letterboxed shots that he just knew he was making it for a big screen. I think filmmakers these days, very often, they don't necessarily know that they're going to get many people to see it on a big screen, you know? And that it really affects me when I see like text messages part of the plot and you're supposed to be able to read a text message. I'm on my computer screen and it's like 0.5 font. I can't read anything, but when you know your canvas is ultimately going to be that big, I think it leads directors to really shoot in a certain way. So the opening sequences are gorgeous. We talk about that, that all space films start in darkness and space, and this one does. But boy, when that ship passes over you, it's a cargo ship, right? They're mining from some other planet. It's very, very impressive, but it was even getting into these small, dark spaces. He uses the sort of the widescreen format very, very well. I would say that the ship is too large, but we can come back to that later.
Some of the things which I remember differently to what I actually saw when we sat down and watched it last Friday was, I think, the themes of the film. So in my mind, there is a very strong theme of corporate control. And in my mind, the original Alien from 1979 is a kind of early feminist masterpiece. In my mind, it's something which really delves into the notion of feminism and exploitation. And yet, watching it on Friday, I was surprised to see that both of these themes, are actually only pretty lightly explored. I remember them being much closer to center stage in this film, but they are not. Watching the film last Friday, I came away thinking, this script actually feels like a kind of slightly schlocky Walter Hill picture. I don't think the character motivations are, quite so clear. We have a number of, what by modern standards seem like sort of fairly tropey horror cliches. The characters keep splitting up. Ian Holm, right from the very first moment you see him, looks a bit evil. And, his kind of character journey seems very, very clearly telegraphed. I don't know whether if I saw the film without being aware of what was going to happen, would I spot that? But I think I was. I think the film really puts a big neon sign over Ian Holm's character right from the outset and says, look, bad guy. And even like some of the action sequences, although, it does that beautiful cinematic thing which we love, which is, telling a story without using any dialogue, there are scenes which to me feel like maybe realistic got to the edit suite and found that he just didn't quite have the coverage. There are some of the sequences of the ship landing and taking off where I'm not completely sure what's going on, because I think it almost feels like they built this great model and then didn't quite shoot the right shots, or some of the shots were ruined. So I end up kind of thinking, I don't quite understand how all these bits fit together. Overall, the film was a little bit rougher around the edges than I remembered it.
Yes. Well, it's pre-CGI, really. So you've just had to do stuff with models and great camera work and overlaying images and stuff. So I think it was harder to do. It's interesting you mentioned that about just like the ships taking off or going back and forth, because that's the one thing that I thought Romulus did very well. Some of the space travel stuff was really well done. But again, they have the advantage of 45 years more of technology behind them. So it comes off convincingly, I guess. I think there's more strength in the story in this film, though, to the extent that it's a body horror picture. I mean, it doesn't have to have a lot of story, but there are some good setups. And the one thing that makes Ian Holm's character stand out early on is because he seems like he's the corporate guy, right? The working guys, the engineers are complaining to him, I believe, about his wages. Like he represents the company somehow. So he's been alienated for his role with the company, but he does seem very disaffected or something. That he's very aloof, right? He doesn't seem human.
Yeah,
lo and behold, he's not. But and I think that's either well written or well played by Ian Holm. But I agree with you. It's there's a lot of stuff that is forecasted, and a lot of things that are, if the technology were better, it would probably be more convincing.
I mean, it still manages to use some of those kind of Freudy type things. It is, very clearly a penis-shaped monster. I seem to remember seeing less of the alien than you actually do in the picture. So, in my mind, the alien is all just kind of shadows and shiny surfaces and slime. Whereas actually there are a few scenes where you can clearly see it's a bloke in a suit with a rather unwieldy headpiece.
Yeah.
And again, that kind of surprised me. I think, I didn't realize it was, quite so transparently a bloke in a plastic suit.
Yeah.
And those bits which are, I think, trying to talk about sexual politics or talk about feminism, seem a little bit clunky to my modern eyes. I mean, so Ian Holm, Ash, tries to kill Ripley in this kind of very, very weird way. And you can see that they were probably quite pleased with this when they came up, where he tries to kind of choke her to death with a pornographic magazine.
Yeah.
And you kind of think, well, they were probably quite pleased to have that idea, and that seems, pretty, pretty subtextual and intelligent. But watching it on screen, I think it looks kind of utterly ludicrous, and it's a kind of really stupid way to try to kill somebody.
Yeah.
We do have this issue that when Ian Holm gets beaten up, all this semen comes bursting out of him, and I look at that now and I kind of think, okay, yeah, that's, I can see what they're trying to explore there, but it still feels a little bit clunky and a bit on the nose and doesn't quite add together. Watching the film now, having not seen it for a long time and being a little bit older and more experienced, it does feel like a film which maybe came together in the edit more than I realised when I watched it first.
Yeah.
There are a few little disjointed moments and a few happy accidents which all bring the thing together and kind of unify it. But it doesn't feel quite as meticulously planned as it does in my mind. So overall, I can understand why this is a classic, and this is an important film, and one which birthed a massive franchise,
yeah.
and one which we see the influence of in countless films since 1979. It's been astonishingly influential, but it is also just a little bit paper and cardboard, and a little bit not quite in control of the material, and not quite as towering an achievement as I seem to remember it being.
I think that's an appropriate perspective for someone who saw it, decades ago and then comes back to it. We're just so nostalgic, and sometimes we think things were much better than they actually were, or much more sophisticated. So I think that's just age playing with it. I think it's kind of that Rolling Stones.
You're calling me old, basically. I'm old.
Yeah.
Calling me old.
And it's that Rolling Stones analogy before that, it was Led Zeppelin, wasn't it? As it gets older, it doesn't get so good. So, but I think it does. As you said, it birthed this entire franchise and made a lot of people a lot of money, which is great. Probably gave Ridley Scott really his career in many ways. I mean,
yes,
he made some things before that, but this definitely put a stamp on his future. So yeah, it's not a film that I love. I didn't love it at the time, but I think it's well made. I think they did a good job. But I think you. Even though there's that man in that suit, it's still scarier to me than the CGI, the largely CGI graphics of Romulus. So there's an actor in a suit, maybe a man, maybe a woman, whatever, but someone was credited as the alien. I remember seeing that in the credits. And I think it's just scarier. And there's this one scene where I guess she's getting away in the shuttle with Jonesy at the end.
Yeah.
So Ripley's escaping, and Ripley doesn't really get strong until really the second half of this film. She sort of feels like a minor character.
Yeah.
No one really is taking charge. I mean, if there's anything of a protagonist, it's almost John Hurt, because he's the one who's having stuff happen to him, and he's out there volunteering for the mission and all that. And then Ripley sort of takes over in maybe the final third, but certainly the second half of the film. But when she's in that shuttle getting away, that for me is the great moment where the alien just sort of blends into all the tubing and the wiring, and all of a sudden she's just getting ready to jump into her cryogenic chamber for who knows how long, 10 months or something like that. And the thing just sort of starts moving around and falling out. And I think that's just it's a great scene because, of course, you've been wrong-footed. You think the whole thing's over and she's going to get away with the cat, but she doesn't. And I also, talk about remembering things differently, I thought Jones had a different part. I thought Jones actually got infected and came back either in a later film or something like that, because I think that would have been a great twist. She goes to incredible effort and expends lots of calories and makes a lot of poor decisions just to save the cat. But she does it. It's just Blake Snyder coming at us again. I think we've had 2 cats saved in the last 2 films. Maybe the last 3 films, literally. So there is that element to it. But I think it's a great moment. But in terms of like the chemistry involved, as an anesthetist, you might be able to help me a little bit. She looks like she's gassing the thing out at first, right? Like she's put on her suit, she gets back into her space suit, and then she starts throwing gas at the alien, and eventually sort of jettisons it. But I was wondering, I mean, I don't remember if Jones is already in his little chamber, sleeping tight.
Yeah, he is.
Okay.
She has put Jones in the little kind of sleep chamber first.
So the idea is that you gas it and then you can get rid of it.
But I can't think of a very sensible reason why there's a bunch of unusual gases available on tap in an escape shuttle. It's one of those things which probably seemed like a sensible idea at 2:00 in the morning when you're desperately trying to rack your brains for any reason to flush the alien out of its hiding place.
Well, there's a lot of downtime. Maybe people were using the gases recreationally or something like that.
I mean, that's another kind of slightly weird moment, which I hadn't really remembered, which is, in my mind, it was quite a feministy film. And then towards the end of the film, there's a scene where Sigourney Weaver takes all her clothes off and makes sure she bends over to show you her bottom. And that all felt kind of very male gazy and a little bit peculiar. And I was asking myself, why does this belong in the film? I thought we were just saying something about kind of bodily autonomy and sort of and the penis monster, and now suddenly we have to watch her walk around in her underwear for 5 minutes before the film climaxes.
And it repeats in Romulus. Ripley has this. For Ripley, it's this tiny, ill-fitting underwear. I'm sure she would never put that on in real life. Maybe it's space underwear. I don't know. But then you get to underwear. Romulus. Rain does the same thing, and it's sort of like boxer shorts and a tank top T-shirt or something like that, but it's also sort of this ill-fitting underwear at the climax of both of these films. And
it's a little bit less male gazy, shake your butt at the camera, though, I think, in Romulus.
Exactly, and probably intentionally. Maybe they were trying to redo that scene or take that back, But it's well, I'll take that away from my synthesis because strange underwear was in my synthesis for later.
Well, let's. The short answer. Great picture, but a bit of a disappointment coming back to it 45 years on. We will do our synthesis, but before, would you like to play my favourite game?
I would love to play your favourite game.
Or shall we play Who Am I?
Oh, that's one. Oh, you have another game that you like.
Who am I?
I went first last time, so I'm happy to do the right thing and let you go first.
Well, my theory is that we might say the same person. I don't know, but maybe not. Now I've heard your opinion. Out of all the characters on screen, I think maybe I am Andy, the android in Alien Romulus. Insofar as I like bad jokes and tend to come up with a lot of them when out with the family. I am a bit of a nerd. I think I do try to do the right thing. But I do also sometimes find myself going to sleep at inappropriate times as well, which is the other thing that Andy does. So I think if I am anybody, I am Andy, the kind of the not quite adequate and then hyper adequate and then not quite adequate again android. Who were you this week?
Wow, well done. I mean, that's the best character in both films, so the best acting. So I'm not Andy. I'm John Hurt. Kane. I think his name is Kane in this film.
It's Kane.
A curious man, maybe a little bit careless, but I think we have the same sentiment, which is please kill me off before the midpoint or at the midpoint, so I can go watch a better movie somewhere else. I think that's John Hurt. Which is, it's just one of those, it's really one of the most frightening films and moments in film history, I think, is when.
Yeah. Oh, it is, isn't it? Yes.
Having his dinner, he's all recovered. He looks kind of weak, but he's okay until he's not okay.
It's interesting. Out of all the great acting he did in his career, this is probably the most famous moment of his acting life, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure he's happy about it because was happy about it because that made him famous for sure.
And you, like Kane, enjoy your food, don't you?
I do. I eat food and I enjoy it. Yes. Correct. Correct you are. How did you guess? How did you know?
Right, let's okay, well let's play the jingle. Let's put everyone out of their misery. See if we can draw these two extremely different films together somehow. I don't know how we're going to do this.
I have some very base ideas.
Start with the base stuff. You give me lay the base on me.
Both films have Ian Holm alive, dead, or both. And it really, I will say that in Romulus, it works really well for Ian Holm to sort of be CGI'd into the scene because it makes him look even more cyborgy and dated.
Yes.
It's clever. It's quite clever. And I just love those moments. I think that I probably told you before. I think the two best scenes in Alien, the original, are the John Hurt scene that we just talked about, and then Ian Holm being just totally tangled up. They've been beating him and trying to kill him, but then they need to sort of reactivate him so that they can get some information from him. And it's just they're two great body horror scenes in the same film, and I really think they're great. Smoking in space. I've never seen so many cigarettes, mostly in Alien the original, but there was some smoking as a nod to in Romulus, I think, a nod to the original. Rain inside of spaceships. It just feels like there was water. Maybe it was condensation coming from somewhere else. But they were very wet spaceships, which I can't imagine space being that wet. I think you would have all your water safely stored in one place, and you'd probably be recollecting water for later use, but these guys are just pouring lakes and oceans worth of water inside the spaceship. It was really disturbing. But I'll get serious. Right. Not that I wasn't before. I think there are a couple of massive exposition holes in both stories that, for me as a writer and a filmmaker, I really needed more. And I thought that was a place to make a better film. In the original, there's this, when they land on that planet looking for the distressed beacon or whatnot, they encounter what looks like kind of like a statue of one of the aliens, or a statue of some sort of creature or someone going through space, or was it the actual crash, the remnants of a crash? And I think there was more there. There was more that could be explored there. And it would probably explain, the xenomorph race a little bit, or the xenomorph motivations, intentions, their history in some way, to get a bit more information there. Instead, they just kind of go down into this like farm full of eggs, which doesn't really make sense. If this person had crashed into the planet, was he carrying a lot of eggs, and then they just fell into this perfect field of eggs? I think there could have been more right there. And similarly, I think for the Romulus film, I felt like we knew that Rain and Andy wanted to get to this other planet and whatnot, and then the other mates on the trip, Rain's friends, they probably wanted to escape too. But we don't really know a whole lot about that mining colony. I mean, they give it to us in the first few minutes, and there's probably enough there. It's just a bad place. There's lots of sin. There's no sun. It's all polluted, and they're digging for no money. I get it. They want to leave. But that was a more interesting place, I think, than the ship. And then also just a lot of, those glimpses of space just drove me crazy because they were so cool, and yet we didn't really get much of it. It was probably less than 2 minutes of the whole film. But it was beautiful, and it showed this other world, because both of these films really rely on dark, confined spaces. And for me, that's a theater thing. But I think in cinema, you can get outside of there once in a while and show us something different and something more imaginative. But there's the second film, Romulus, is so based on previous intellectual property that it's probably afraid to get outside of that spaceship. And then I would say I think the Romulus does a better job of having a smaller space in a sense. Like that ship in Alien is too big. I'm not really scared of the alien because I know there's a place I can hide and get away from it. They have so much space, it just makes it hard to really follow the crew, follow any interesting or smart things that they're doing to evade the xenomorph. But I just felt like it was too big a space. So they both rely on small spaces, but Alien Original was just a little bit unmanageable somehow. It was just too large. I think it would have been a more intense film if it had been a smaller space. And that's why the climax, I think, is intense because she's in a very small space with the alien. And I think that's when it really pays off. So those are some synthesis-like ideas for me.
I think if you put these two films back to back, the big idea I came away with most vividly was that writerly notion that writing is rewriting.
Yeah.
Because Alien Romulus is kind of largely, it's sort of a rewrite of Alien.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of going over the same material, but I'm going to offer an extremely controversial opinion now, which is, having seen the two films back to back, I'm going to come out and say I think Alien Romulus might be the better film.
That is controversial.
Which is not,
that's like
which is
saying,
not what I...
That's like saying Kaczynski on the podcast.
Because I wrote in my notes here, like, basically Romulus explores many of the same ideas as the original Alien, but I reckon in most cases it has a better or a more nuanced or a more sophisticated take on those ideas. And it's, I do appreciate that Romulus couldn't exist without the original Alien. But if you want to talk about a film in terms of its themes and their expression, I think Romulus is the winner. I think it looks at race discrimination in a more sophisticated way. It has more women characters. It explores them more deeply. They have more sophisticated characters themselves. I think it has a more articulate take on corporate exploitation and greed. I think it has more to say about the military-industrial complex. It even briefly touches on things like COVID. I mean, and whether you think this is right or wrong, it is expressing an opinion on like the generational divide. I think because it's interesting. We see it's all young people, all the old people that you see in this film are all bad. It's either the half disintegrated android, or it's the lady who tells Rain that she's signed up for another 6 years and she's got no choice about it. It's trying to talk about this, this modern notion of the lack of opportunities for young people, and it is chiming in, I think, on women's bodily autonomy in a way which is, again, it's more timely and more deeply explored than these issues were looked at in Alien. I think as far as exploring themes go, Romulus has really thought about this and really has something to say. I mean, so Alien, really feels like the pitch. You read the interview with Dan O'Bannon or whatever, and he says, the pitch for Alien was Jaws in space.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is, isn't it? Yep. Whereas I wrote down here on my notes, Romulus feels like the pitch was, let's do Alien again, but let's dive into the material more deeply. The original Alien was like a fairy tale. It was like a sci-fi horror film. It was aiming for something pretty simple and visceral. Yeah. And then I reckon those other themes kind of emerged organically, whereas Romulus to me feels like it's been written to explore these themes from the off, and that is largely thanks to the great work of its predecessor.
Yeah.
But it's like a rewrite. It's you take some good material. And then this is something which I firmly believe any project can be made better through the application of hard work. And they've taken this idea and now they've iterated on it, and that iteration has taken the film from 45 years ago and refreshed it and enriched the soil and dug deeper and found more thematic interest and more to explore. Is it a better film? I don't know. It's probably not as fundamental a film. It may not be a film which is remembered in the same way 45 years' time that Alien is remembered now. But I think as a work of art, which is hoping to transmit and explore ideas, I think it has more to say. Is that bad of me? Maybe it is.
I don't think so. No, I think you're very good in pulling out some of those points. I think. I wish they were a bit clearer. And for me, it always seems kind of like a throwaway. You're just making a monster film or a body horror film. It's good to have clear themes if you can do it. And I think those are lost on the average viewer. That's all I would say. But I think you've made a nice pitch. I'm not going to side with you because I'm a little bit scared of the Two Wheel Cinema Club family. So I want to be the one who says no. Other alien, better.
You are the voice of sanity, whereas I'm going off the deep end here.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, you know what? I would suggest anyone who hasn't seen Alien Romulus, you could do a lot worse. We've certainly seen worse films this year, I reckon.
Absolutely, boy. Yeah.
And how? Well, we've just got time to talk about what also is playing at this theatre.
If by theater you mean my computer to watch television, then I'll tell you.
Oh, the tiny portable theatre you take with you everywhere.
Yes, I think this is another episode where I haven't really seen another film. So, but I have been watching on public television here in the States.
Oh, good for you.
Program called Nova, which is really a science series, and they've done this 3-part series that I just finished. Maybe I had just started it when I was last podding, but it's a Gulf of Maine series. It's called, there are 3 episodes. Peril in the Gulf of Maine, which is talking about environmental degradation due to the fact that the body of water is warming very quickly. Then there's Bounty in the Gulf of Maine, which is really explores aquaculture and more traditional fishing and how it's being done better, and then survival in the Gulf of Maine, which is how to sort of make money while being sustainable. So they just did 3 episodes, is about 3 hours. So that kind of counts as a film, I think. And it's something that's really immediate to me because I spent a lot of time on the Gulf of Maine. So it was really wonderful to learn more about it. How about you?
Then those 3 episodes are still less screen time than Avatar: Way of Water.
Yes. And you learn a lot more about the watery world in this series, too.
We were searching for something to watch as a family on a Saturday evening, and we ended up watching Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Do you remember that?
What year is that?
That's 1991. So it's like the most 1991 cast that you can possibly imagine. It's Kevin Costner, Alan Rickman, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, Christian Slater. It's the most incredibly 1991 film, and they have fantastically 1991 hair. Those kind of big bouffant hair.
Is that a Costner writing and directing credit as well, or
no? So this one directed by Kevin Reynolds, who directed Red Dawn, if you ever saw that, and then Waterworld. So he went on. And this film was kind of a bit of a hit. So he went on to make an even bigger Kevin Costner picture after this. I remember Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves being a lot of fun when we saw it back in 1991, but it's a bit of a peculiar watch these days. They have this real problem with tone in this film. I remember it being a lot of light-hearted fun, a bit of bow and arrow, the choppy-socky fun in the forest, and Alan Rickman being outrageously hilarious as the Sheriff of Nottingham. But Alan Rickman really looks like he believes he's in a completely different film. So like the tone for his scenes is completely different to the tone for most of the rest of the film. What I'd forgotten is that it starts out with 10 minutes of terrible racist stereotypes, though. It starts out with this bit of the film which I'd completely forgotten, where Robin Hood has gone off on the Crusades and he's been captured by some Turks, I suppose, or at least by some Muslim warriors, and there's some really uncomfortable racist scenes. So it's really terrible start to a film. Ends up being kind of cheerful, good fun, but trouble with tone. A peculiar old film, that one. I think we enjoyed it in the end, but there was some hard work getting there. Well, we'll talk about next time. First of all, we'll do the socials on Instagram. We are at Two Real Cinema Club. Read the blog at tworealcinemaclub.com. Comment on our YouTube channel or email us at tworealcinemaclub@gmail.com. We do like your emails. Next time, we haven't completely 100% decided, have we? But we think next time we will probably watch.
We're uncommitted, but I think we're both leaning towards maybe Beetlejuice. You have to say it twice, I believe. Beetlejuice. And possibly, maybe, it's not unlikely that we would compare it to a film called The Others, which is a Spanish film with
Nicole Kidman
from what?
Yeah,
that's probably
2001.
Yeah. So
Ghost World.
That's
what we'll have to call that podcast. So join us next time, probably for some ghosts, unless we bottle out at the last minute.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, as always. I apologise for my opinions on Romulus. And we'll see you next time.
They're not the opinions of the entire production team, or what used to be our production team before we hired them here at the Two Real Cinema Club.